2020 meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. Jim, can you read the language in regards to why some of us are Zooming and some of us are live?
Sure. Pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on number of people that may gather in one place, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted at this meeting, but the public can participate via Zoom. The information is located the agenda.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda this evening is a possible continuation for Red Mill and the Charles. Jim, can you bring us up to date on what's going on?
Yep. Yeah. So this project, obviously, the board has seen kind of an overview. We've conducted a site walk. They've opened the hearing with the Conservation Commission. However, there is a number of large-scale changes that are being made in terms of drainage. We have peer review looking at it right now. In discussing with the applicant, we thought it would be best to just continue this evening rather than waste everyone's time. The request is for the October 8th meeting, which I think is a reasonable time frame given the status of the peer review. And I know Frank from BSC is on, who is our peer review engineer, who can certainly chime in as well. But I think October 8th sounds reasonable for at least the first round of edits.
Any discussion or questions on this? I'd like to have a motion if possible.
I'll move to continue the hearing until October 8th. October.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? I'd like to call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We also had, Jim, have a continuation on 186 Maple Street, definitive subdivision.
That's correct. So 186 Maple Street, I think the board is pretty familiar with at this point. This is an ongoing subdivision that correlates directly with a proposed solar development. The solar development did receive, my understanding, their building permit literally today, which means 30 days out from now, the appeal period will be over. I've had conversations with their project manager about potentially withdrawing that earlier than the 30 days. So my recommendation again would be October 8th. That sits nicely within those 30 days to hopefully get that done, and then we can put this to bed. I'll move to continue the hearing.
Jim, can I just ask a question? Do we want to push it off? We could have a busy meeting October 8th.
My only recommendation to not push it off any further is just in case they do it earlier, you do have to accept that withdrawal. So it would be great to just get it knocked out right away as soon as possible. So
we have to, on the 8th, accept the withdrawal, correct?
Correct. If they do formally submit that withdrawal prior to that meeting, and I'll certainly be working with the project manager to get that.
Then at that point, they don't have anything in front of us now.
Exactly. It would just be a simple
Simply
motion.
will be accepting withdrawal, a procedural action, correct?
Exactly right.
Okay. Do I have a second on Brian's motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Jim, we're here also to talk about Bellingham Shores, major residential development special permit, definitive subdivision, and stormwater management plan. I know we have a lot of items to discuss. Can you just give us an overview of where we are right now?
Yep. So at the last meeting, we did have a number of suggested and recommended edits to the plan set and a number of items that we asked them to investigate. In addition, at the last meeting, we were hoping to discuss drainage a little further, and we were unable to do it at that time. However, BSC and Frank DePietro from BSC is here this evening to certainly answer any questions and provide us with an update on our end for drainage. I'm sure Sean can give us a brief update on the drainage improvements as well and the amendment or the adjustments to the large basin. In addition to drainage, we asked the applicant to look at the buffer that goes along the property line in between the project and the neighbors to make sure that it is well at 100 feet. I think the board was very clear that they wanted to see a 100-foot buffer and not waver from that. Additionally, the open space, the large triangle open space near Candlelight Lane and Silver Lake Road that's being proposed as open space. Given the state of that open space, the board asked for some concepts or ideas about what could potentially go there to rehab that location or restore that location, given its its use as a kind of a construction yard for many years. And then lastly, we asked the applicant to take a closer look at the phasing plan and see what we can do to start the discussion about phrasing any kind of condition that would go there.
So, Jim, if I'm not mistaken, we have three critical issues to discuss. It looks like they've addressed to a great degree the 100-foot buffer. And let's delve into the stormwater management.
Okay. And I know
Who would you like to present first?
Sean Malone. Sean, do you have do you want to pull up a plan?
Yes, I will do that, and I will share my screen. Okay, does everybody see the C5.5 plan?
Yep.
Okay. So this is Basin 1, Parcel A. This is the main stormwater basin in the center portion of the site. What we did in this basin was bring it in a little tighter. We took it almost completely out of the buffer zones. We have some minor grading at the toe of the slope on the outside of the buffer zone here and here, and re-looked at the calculations in order to reduce the size of this basin a little bit. Additionally, we've redesigned the outlets to the basin, so rather than one or two centralized outlets, we've dispersed the outlet flow over 4 separate outlet pipes. So it'll come out of the basin at a lower velocity and disperse more evenly into the wooded area beyond it. Also, these outlets are all outside of the buffer zone. We have also added a clay core to the center of the berm. The purpose of this would be to eliminate potential seepage of water stored in the basin, seeping through the embankment and potentially compromising that embankment. So this would help with the long-term longevity of the basin. We did receive a comment or a comment letter from BSC, and I believe Frank's in here, so I won't really get into that too much, but there was a comment or two with suggested conditions regarding this core and being looked at by a geotechnical engineer and spec'd by a geotechnical engineer prior to construction. And of course, we have no objection to that condition. Basin 2, again, we've added the clay core to the center of the basin. And I think one of the suggestions that Frank had would be to bring this core all the way to the existing grade so that you still don't have fill under here. So that would be part of that design to be submitted prior to construction. Other than that, we're still in each of these watersheds, reducing the rate and volume of runoff from the site. So there should be no drainage issues from the site. If you like, I can stop there, Mr. Chairman, or continue with some of the other changes that we've made.
I'd like to get Jim's input first on stormwater and then Frank's. I think this may be one of the most critical discussion points of the development based on what you proposed in regards to the 100-foot buffer. So Jim, what is your feeling?
Yeah, so I think, Sean has definitely taken a significant step to improve the basin, pulling in and reshaping that basin to get out of as much fill area as possible, as well as getting out of the jurisdictional wetland areas as possible. And then this clay core, which I'm interested in Frank's opinion on, seems to be a significant improvement. My concern always has been longevity of this basin, due to the fact that it's an extremely important structure to maintain water from getting down gradient to homes and lakes and the lake. So this is a critical, as you mentioned, a critical structure. And I think, from my point of view, I think Sean has definitely taken a positive approach, and I'm definitely interested in Frank's opinion as well.
Frank, what are your issues, if you have any?
Sure. So, again, I think I want to start. The previous peer review comments that we had have been addressed, and I think they've addressed satisfactorily. The latest set of the plans, again, I would agree with Jim that the shift of the infiltration basin 1 out of the buffer zone, they've maintained pretty much exactly the same hydraulic capacities, hydrology. The outflow and stuff have not been modified from what was done before, minor adjustments. I think the modifications, the way they set up the outlet flows are fine. My comment regarding the clay core, which I think is a very positive thing, it basically will stop infiltration or seepage through the wall of the berm. My concern really was that it didn't go down far enough. So if you look at section AA on Sean's plan, you can sort of see the bottom of the clay barrier there, or clay core, is below the existing grade. And so generally speaking, the concern would be, is there going to be seepage along the interface with the existing or the original soil material and that berm? And so by putting the clay barrier below that, you're basically putting up a barrier that the water can't get through there. If Sean, you should go down to section C on the same plan. The concern I had there is really twofold. One is you can sort of see that clay barrier doesn't go all the way down to the, again, existing grade. And so again, there may be, because I'm not a hydrogeologist, but my concern would be potential for seepage along that. And the second part of that is tied to the outlet pipes. So when you install a drain pipe, you generally embed it in a permeable material, gravel, crushed stone, or something like that, and that can act as an avenue as well. So my concern, or my suggestion for consideration, would be that clay barrier extend around the any drainage pipes coming out of either one of the infiltration basins, and then extend below the existing grade. I've seen some designs where they add a little bit of a key in at the bottom. So imagine, if you will, another inverted sort of rectangular or quadrangle that goes into the soil below it. And what that does, it doesn't provide a straight surface for the water to go underneath the clay barrier. There's another small barrier, maybe it's a foot or two below the bottom of the main barrier. Again, my recommendation would be that be looked at and designed by a geotechnical person who has the expertise and understanding, and that be included in anything you do prior to construction. But those are really my sort of concerns about the 2 infiltration basins. One minor point on basin 2, there's a scrivener's error. And so the outlet structure should be at elevation 270, I believe. On one of the, I think it's the cross section, it shows it at 270.5, which happens to be the same elevation as the spillway. Again, design, you want to have the spillway slightly higher than your outlet. That's a very easily addressable issue. Again, I really just think it's just a scrivener's error. And then the last item I just wanted to talk about a note was, I believe the Conservation Commission asked Sean and his folks to look at a groundwater mounding analysis or evaluation underneath both of the infiltration basins. And the concern would be with the water sitting in the basin, you're going to raise the groundwater all around this area for an extended area. There's a standard methodology, the Hentush equation, that is used throughout the industry to determine what a mounding evaluation would be. Sean and his folks did that evaluation for each of the basins. Basically, what it shows is that the mounding underneath the basin, and they look at a 36-hour period, so it's a relatively limited period, pretty much extends just about to the edges of the berm, and doesn't really go beyond, as you get out 120, 140 feet from the center of each of the infiltration basins. That mound is basically at the existing pre-development groundwater conditions. So there's not a major raising of groundwater around the basins. That's pretty much it for my comments. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Frank, I have one before I open up to the board. At the end of this discussion, will you be able to give Jim and Sean by next week some points that need to be addressed based on your concerns?
Sure, I could certainly do that. I did file a letter this week. I think it was only yesterday, so it only just get in the door, but I'd be happy to provide any clarification, additional points.
I'd like to open it to the board. Brian?
I just have one quick question, Frank or Sean, or both of you. For some other projects in town, we've been experiencing rainfalls that exceed the standard amount of rain, the frequency of those 100-year storms, and just a lot more volume coming from those storms, and they're coming more frequently. I'm curious if this basin is designed to sort of conservatively weather those increased capacity storms, and what additional capacity is in this system.
I would say yes to your question. We designed these for a 100-year storm. I'm not sure if we've had storms that have exceeded that, but certainly there have been some intense storms. But I would note even for our 100-year storm event, we still have the reduction in both the rate and the volume. So I don't anticipate any issues with storm events in the future here.
If I could add a little bit to that, and correct me if I'm off on this, Sean. So under the Wetland Protection Act, they go back and use rainfall data from the 1970s or before 1970s, technical paper 40. I think your bylaw, and I'm pretty sure Sean used this. I can't remember if it was the Cornell or the other one. There was an updated version in the late 90s and another one in the mid 2000s. I don't remember the specifics here, but for example, the 100-year storm might have been from the 1970s, 7.5 or 7.4 inches of rainfall in 24 hours. I think the Cornell is around 8.2 or 8.3 inches. And again, I'm doing this from memory. So by using the later data, you're using a higher volume of rainfall than what is required under the State Wetlands Protection Act. So there is something built in there. Is it continuing to change? Yes. But again, I think there's some freeboard in here, and quite honestly, the drainage system conveying it doesn't handle a 100-year storm. It handles a 25-year storm. So for the near future, depending how slow or fast climate change continues to accelerate, I think the basin has been designed in a conservative manner for both basins.
I'm Brian Blake. I'm in agreement, but I don't want to get out of turn. I'll have a question for Jim in a moment. Dennis?
Yeah, my only question was how deep the clay core is going to be. And I think Frank pretty much summed that up, and I'll probably wait till Geotech comes back with his findings. Because that's gonna be out for the leaching purpose of it, and I didn't know if they want to line that sides of that with clay.
I think that may be one of the recommendations that Frank was talking about.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Liz,
I have no questions at this time.
Phil,
The longevity of the clay core, is there a difference between the clay core method and a more typical method? I guess I'd throw that out to Mr. Malone.
Yes, so a lot of times you'll construct a basin with just the material that's on the site. And in this case, it's somewhat pervious material. So the concern was that this material would allow flow laterally, horizontally out of the basin rather than down and out. And over time, with that flow horizontally, you could compromise the integrity of the berm. So the clay core would in essence put a wall around the basin inside that berm to prevent that horizontal movement of the water and bring everything down. So that's why, and then it would help with the long-term stability of the slope.
I guess what would be the longevity of the typical lifespan of the clay core method?
I think if this is maintained and, if there are any little rills or things like that, and all that's maintained over time, it could be, forever.
I mean, just to sort of add to that, again, I think as with anything, it's how it's constructed. So if the clay core is put in, compacted appropriately, it's almost going to be a permanent type barrier. The other part of that, though, is, and Sean alluded to this, that is the maintenance of the basin. So one of the issues that help undermine dams or this type of basin would be vegetation growing along the side slopes, the roots going into the berm or the walls, and that again undermine. The tree falls out, there's a hole in the wall and whatever. So I think it's going to be very important to maintain the longevity of these structures, that there is a regular maintenance. So maybe on an annual basis, someone might go out there and make sure there's not trees or shrubs growing on the sides of the basin, for example. Make sure that it is the vegetation is sort of cut on a regular basis, and the grass, weeds, whatever, don't get too high.
And just to add to that final point that Frank mentioned, as part of our stormwater report, we do have an operation and maintenance plan, which does describe those regular maintenance items for the whole stormwater system, but the basin as well.
And maybe one other item, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, that maintenance should maybe take a look at to make sure that animals aren't doing burrows. So I have an above ground pool, and about 3 or 4 years ago, one morning we got up and the pool was empty, and it turned out that a groundhog had dug under the pool, and when it tried to come to the surface, it punctured the whole pool, and 18,000 gallons went out. So again, those are the kind of things that you want to make sure that as you inspect it, you want to walk along the slope to make sure you don't see an animal burrow or something like that in there. I'm only being a little facetious, but that could be an issue.
So the typical maintenance is going to be different than the average basin that we have here in town. And I'm assuming 10 years from now, who's going to be in charge of doing this?
I'll address that with Jim in a minute.
All right, thank you, sir. That's my last question then.
Thank you for raising that. Jim, I have a couple of questions for both, all three, Sean, Frank, and Jim. Frank, you mentioned having a geoengineer or a specialist look at this prior to construction.
Yeah, I mean, I would go so far as to say that the geotech should provide a design and specifications. There need to be a certain compaction ratios and things like that. And No offense to Sean and myself, I don't think we have the geotechnical background to sort of justify that. I'd like to have a professional do that to make sure that it is designed and then constructed appropriately.
Frank, I'd like to take it one step further. I would like to have that person not only look how it's constructed, but also be available to be on site as needed during construction. You know, we have one shot at this. And I know people had mentioned the 100-year storm. And I think, Jim, since you've been on the board, how many 100-year storms have we had?
Yeah, we've had a lot of storms that have reached old basins, certainly.
You know, throughout the town and, you know, various locations, we've had some concerns. So, we have really, as I said earlier, one shot to get this right. So I think the specialist who looks at it may be on call to monitor construction. I assume they do that.
Yes, my understanding is, yeah, I've been involved with people who do that, yes, from geotechnical.
And I know a question was raised earlier. I didn't mean to cut that person off. I'm very concerned about maintenance and who's going to be responsible for it. I know in some developments, speaking from experience, there are retention ponds that have not been touched in 20 or 30 years. Jim, is there any way we can get an account set up that traffic could fund over time for maintenance? Or is that the responsibility of the town?
Yeah, that's actually a standard condition that the board has done for subdivision, the stormwater annuity that would be set up, and it basically goes into it's a one-time payment. We can work out what that maintenance cost would look like. We have a pretty standard formula at this point, and it would go into DPW account for maintenance. But as you guys point out, it might need to be the maintenance schedule might need to be refined a little bit. So I can certainly work with Sean and the DPW director on what that would look like.
Now, I apologize. I did not get the name of the gentleman who raised the issue about the maintenance. But sir, I think that hopefully will address your concern.
I think that was you, Bill.
Oh, yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions in regards to the maintenance, sir? We will button that up.
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question about getting back to 100-year storm. What point about 100-year storm was raised, and I heard something about a 25-year storm. So are these bases designed for 100 years or 25?
Jim, can you address that?
Sean, you want to take it?
Yes. So the basin is designed for a 100-year storm event. The 25-year storm event is a typical design standard for the piping and the flow to the basin. And that would be at a minimum. So the idea being if there was a surge or an influx of flow beyond that 25-year storm that the system can handle, the basin would still be able to handle that.
Thank you.
Jim, what I'd like to see done is something that Frank had raised. I'd like to see if we can use the new Cornell numbers.
Yep, yeah, and for this one, given that we're permitting side by side with conservation, we do use the updated numbers because it's codified in their local regulations.
Okay. So Sean, I think you may have a little bit of homework in that regard. Any other questions or concerns from anyone on the board or the audience on the stormwater management? Jim, can you bring the screen back to, Sean, can you release the screen?
Yes. Okay.
Now, I think we also want to talk about, Sean, you want to mention what you've done with the 100-foot buffer? And I want to thank you for doing that.
Yes. And if you like, I could put the plan back.
That's fine.
Okay. So with regard to, is that, oh, there we go. So with regard to the 100-foot buffer, if, I'm sure everyone recalls, we were seeking to reduce the buffer to about 85 feet in a couple locations here, along this stretch here, and along this stretch here. And after the last meeting and conversation with the board, we understood that that was not advisable to pursue. So we've gone ahead and revised the plan to incorporate the full 100-foot buffer required by the MRD bylaw. And in order to accomplish this and still have a minimum of 30 feet for a backyard, we pushed this road to the east approximately 10 feet. And squeeze these lots a little bit. So this road is the same. It's just, it came out of this area here. So, and we also I prepared this for our discussion today after talking about this with Jim a little bit. A more detailed sketch on what we were talking about for the buffer enhancement. And sorry to keep flipping screens, but over in this area, this is an area that has been somewhat devoid of vegetation. You can see the existing tree line with some open areas here. So as part of the buffer change, we've also added some plantings in this area. We have a row of deciduous trees on either side here where it faces the street and along these houses here. And these would be looking at kind of a large canopy deciduous tree like an American elm or an oak, something like that. And then in the center, and to fill in some of these other gaps, we would put some evergreen trees like a white pine, things of that would fill in some of these gaps and kind of reforest the area. So that was the changes to the buffer zone. Oh, and the Mr. Chair, sorry, the one other thing I wanted to mention with regard to this plan is we also heard from the board some concern about back-to-back lots and a lack of screening. So we've added some evergreen screens here and here, here, along this row here to make sure that there's a vegetated screen planted for those houses.
Thank you very much. Before I go to Jim, I want to ask the board if they have any comments. Brian?
No, I appreciate the applicant moving the buffer and adding the screening. I think that's great. I don't have any questions.
Dennis?
Now, when you move the road, did you take the 10 feet from the lots that are behind that road?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
When you move that road 10 feet, you take the 10 feet from the existing lots that are there from like 80 to 95 or whatever?
Out of, it was 69 to 80, these ones here.
So they lost 10 feet on their lots.
Correct, and these were larger lots too. These were on the order of 12 to 15,000 square feet, where these are a little bit smaller, closer to 9 or 10. So these had a little bit more to give.
All right, thank you.
Liz?
I mean, my only question is moving the road, that won't change any of the discussion about the look and feel and, you know, how having streetscape and all that kind of stuff.
No, we still have all the street trees, the sidewalk in the same location, and still have some curvilineature movement to this roadway, so it's not like just a straightaway. So I think the overall design intent of the road is still the same.
Okay, thank you.
Phil?
No questions, but thank you for sharpening your pencils, guys. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. And I want to delve into it a little bit further, but I just want to raise the issue that the board brought up at the last meeting, that you had some smaller lots that you plan to put smaller houses on for inclusionary housing. The smaller lots that you now have, you created some smaller lots. Are those equally dispersed between regular housing, a non-inclusionary and inclusionary?
I would say yes, and you know, we have more smaller lots than than the number required by, or the number of inclusionary houses that would be required. So it's not to say that every small lot is going to be an inclusionary unit.
Well, that's one thing we do not want.
Right, right, understood.
I'll get back to that in a moment. In regards to property lines and the vegetation you're adding, will it clearly be identified for these homeowners where the property lines are when they buy the homes?
Yes, and what we have along this buffer area is markers that will be placed at each of the lot corners, as well as an intermediate location in between the lot corners. And what we talked about with the Conservation Commission is this would be a marker, a disc on like a 3-foot high pressure treated wood post, a 4x4 post that would be placed in here to delineate this. And as you can see, I think we have over 100 markers that'll be placed along this area to clearly identify the limit of the owner's property.
And on the other lots as well, will that be identifiable?
And then all of the other lots, interior marks would have, you know, typical lot corner monumentation and typically required of any subdivision.
Those will be in the ground, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In regards to the area where you've taken the space from and where you plan to plant trees, you're going to keep as much vegetation there as possible?
Yes. Which area, Mr. Chair?
All behind the lots that you shifted up by 9 to 10 feet, where you have all the markers.
Yes.
You're going to leave as much vegetation between the other development, the other homes in this development, correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Anything within that 100 feet cannot be touched.
Okay. Jim, you have any concerns?
Just a few comments. Actually, one touches on what you just mentioned. Sean, I see when you were pulling in the lines, you may have missed just where the limit of clearing lines are. I'm looking at behind like 42, 43, and along 44. So yeah, more to, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
To pull it in, that would be good, because like the chair was saying, wherever that 100-foot line is, you don't want any clearing beyond that. And in some places, you're actually pulling it even further, so that's great. And then the other thing was the enhanced buffer screening exhibit. If you are getting to a point where you have some kind of exact locations, it would be good to include like a schedule, the tree caliper, type caliper, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I understand right now, Jim, everything we're looking at is conceptual, correct? We've not seen plans for homes.
Well, you do have plans for a home. You do have types. So I believe it's 4 types that they have proposed.
They're going to vary the houses so it doesn't look similar, correct?
Right. That's the intention that the board has stated so far, and we certainly can illustrate that in the conditions that we want them varied. However many lots, it has to be a equal percentage of the 4 or something of that nature. Certainly talk about that or refine a condition to meet that, certainly.
I want this to have some country flavor to it. Any other questions from the audience on the 100-foot buffer?
I don't see any.
Okay. Jim, I'd like to move on. Sean, we get the stream back for a moment. We're going to talk about the triangle space, which is considered open. I know we requested a restoration plan. I think we need to beat this up a little bit. Jim, can you clarify what you've learned since the last meeting about the open space plan and the triangle?
Yeah, sure. And I think Sean does have another exhibit if you want to pull it up. So in that open space plan, there's a couple of things that I did address with Sean. Some initial concerns, just big picture type concerns that I think we're all already aware of, and really why the restoration plan was requested. This triangle is an area in which it used to be forested at one time, and now it's kind of the remnants of a construction site. There's a sewer line running through it. There's riprap swales that are associated with a drainage basin that's from another project in it. So there's a lot of issues going on with this open space, and I commend Sean for taking a stab at trying to provide a plan to rehab and restore this site. Right now what you see there is essentially, I believe it's 35 trees and 36 evergreens, some regrading and some loam and seeding, and that's definitely a good recommendation in my opinion. One thing I do note as well is that something interesting that I thought Sean brought up was creating a walkable orchard setting is how he describes it. And I found that fascinating, and it made me think about how the lake used to be used as access for recreation. And so this restoration of open space, we talk about it, open space and for conservation purposes, but given the degraded aspect of the site and how it could be restored, perhaps this is more of a walkable picnic type area and creating access to the lake. I know conservation last night discussed this at length and asked for Sean to look at the lot that's also still being used for drainage for the other site. I think it's known as lot 10 on Silver Lake Road. So that is actually on that plan. If you look to the right of 99 Silver Lake, there's a kind of that's where the outfall for that drainage basin on the other project is. And so it's already kind of a straight shot to the lake there. It's owned by the applicant. So I just thought it would be interesting to discuss and see what kind of access opportunities we have with that parcel as well. That could create a nice cohesive open space opportunity there. Aside from that, I think the open space, again, I think it's a really interesting concept. I asked DPW to kind of cost out what this might look like in terms of dollars, because the reason I say that is I really like this concept, but I think this might be an opportunity to look to the neighborhood and look to the residents and say, what do they want? What could be an opportunity for them? So perhaps it's a payment in lieu of, and we look at a kind of a master plan of that open space. But that's just my initial thoughts on it. Again, I commend Sean for looking at this. And my other comment would be, again, a schedule, just like the last one of, I know you had addressed type or kind of big picture evergreen and deciduous, but if there was a recommended type and caliber, that could certainly help get a better understanding of it.
I'd like to open it to the board for any comments. As usual, Brian, I'll start with you.
Jim, so when you're talking about, well, I have two questions. with regard to that lot 10, that's used for the drainage system already in place, what would that be?
Well, so there's no access right now to the lake. There was access to the lake on Silver Lake Road, but that's actually been used up for drainage for the road itself. So there's no access whatsoever. This new neighborhood that's being developed uphill, could certainly use this as an opportunity to access it, as well as, everyone in the neighborhood, as well as Bellingham Shores, who will have direct access to Silver Lake Road. That could be easily just simple canoe launch. It could be walking, swimming in the lake, what have you, rather than traversing through somebody's backyard. This would be a nice public access.
Okay.
Can I just interject before I have my comments? It sort of adds to the idea, if I'm not mistaken, this development's called Bellingham Shores.
Bellingham Shores, yeah.
Okay, so, it sort of makes sense to somehow give us some access to, the shore of the lake. If that can be done. I'm in total agreement, but I'll get back to that after some of the other members speak. Brian, do you have any other concerns?
No, my only other question, Jim and Sean and everyone else, that is a sensitive area with regard to the drainage and for that other project. And do we need to be mindful of any sort of unintended consequences?
That's a good point, Brian. And actually, Sean and I spoke about that some the other day. Currently, that drainage structure is being relooked at by the other project. And again, Sean's not the engineer for that one, but I know he's aware of it. And so they're looking at how to improve upon that basin. And so a notice of intent is going before the Conservation Commission and the Department of Environmental Protection is involved in that. So certainly, yeah, anything that we do on the slope, and that's again another reason why, while this plan looks nice, I think maybe it's a condition of a payment in lieu of that we can tackle once everything else is finalized in that location. Because that anything that we do upgrading of that structure certainly is going to impact that structure.
Dennis?
No other questions.
Okay, do you have any comments?
Yeah, on that, you're gonna regrade the 3-to-1 slope. What's that grade now?
In some areas, it seems to be as steep as 2-to-1. So that was the idea, is to just try to smooth it out, and it's kind of a little haphazard. So just kind of clean it up a little bit. And this area here is there's kind of a plateau, and then kind of slopes steeply. So the idea was to pull these grades down to flatten this area. I think we had about a 3% slope here, just to kind of make a more usable lawn. So that was kind of our thought on this.
All right, thank you.
Liz?
My only question is, if we, move forward and try to come up with a master plan or create something the neighborhood can use, would it be restricted just to those in the neighborhood? Or would it be available to everyone? And if so, does that become problematic with traffic and parking and people coming in from outside of the neighborhood? Because I know there's not a lot of area on Silver Lake Road in that part.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that would be a conversation we certainly have, but in terms of ownership, it's ultimately up to this board actually, to grant the open space to, or for the applicant to grant the open space to either the town, which would be the town as a whole, or conservation, which then they would deem whether or not it's, recreation or just conservation land itself.
Thank you.
Phil?
I guess one question for Jim. I think the last meeting we talked about the Conservation Board wasn't interested at all in this. Has that changed based upon this, or is it still an open question?
Yeah, I think it's still an open question. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the attitude that I heard last night, was the open space is still kind of up in the air about what they would like to take on. we're having ongoing conversations with them. My opinion is this triangle doesn't really lend itself to conservation land. But I think the bulk of the open space, the other aspects of it certainly could. It's nice area with lots of wetlands and stuff like that elsewhere. This one is more of, a former construction site. So I think
They don't want it moving.
pardon?
They don't want it moving.
Yeah.
I guess it's mentioning open space, and I don't know whether we're going to tackle that later today, but when moving lots 69 to 80 back, that cut substantially to your open space calculations?
This change here?
Yeah.
No, and actually it does the exact opposite because this road didn't change. So this perimeter didn't change. However, this perimeter did change. So we actually gain more open space here.
Okay, so the track between houses like 87 through 73, that's not part of your open space calculation.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I don't know if we've talked about open space, and maybe that's not the right place right now, but I guess at one point I'd ask for like an old-fashioned spreadsheet of your open space calculations on this.
On the whole development.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that goes back prior to Sean maybe even being involved, but at one point I'd asked for that in an old-fashioned spreadsheet. So I think as we move forward, I think that putting that back on the table is something I'd like to see.
We do have on our overall open space plan this chart that lists out each of the open space areas and what their actual area is, and that corresponds open space 3, open space 1, 4, and 2 down here. So we do have that broken out on the plans.
Sean, could you color code that for a future meeting?
Sure, color code each of the different open space areas. Yeah.
Or open space in general, whatever Jim thinks is more appropriate. Just so we get a better visual of what it is.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that, but just with this plan, while we're talking about it, all of this area that has this triangle hatch on it is all open space. The white areas that doesn't have any hatch, that's the only development.
Okay. In regards to my comments about the open space, I'd like to get as much use as possible on that triangle. Jim, is any of that considered in the lake at all?
Yeah, so Sean, I know this was brought up at conservation. There's not only is there a sewer line running through the open space, the drainage swales, but there's also, it's also underwater in some area. I know you only had about 12 hours since last meeting, so you probably haven't done any due diligence on the ownership or the parcel line there.
Right. So what I need to do is I need to get together with our surveyors to understand what this property line is based on and what this bank of the lake is based on. And as the chair of the Conservation Commission was saying that kind of started this conversation, is his understanding was any land underwater associated with the lake was actually the town's property. So this area would contradict that assumption. So we have to do a little bit of homework on our end to confirm that, and we'll ask from the professional land surveyor to either one, certify that this is in fact the correct lines, or correct the lines and recalculate the numbers. But any change like that, as well as adding additional drainage area or drainage easements for this, won't change our overall meeting the open space requirements. The 60% will still be far above that.
Sean, does the easement count as open space as well?
No. No, that in our calculations right now, this whole box right here is not counted in any of the open space.
Okay. And before I open up to the public, I've asked some unique questions in my time on the board. I have another, probably the strangest one I've ever asked. I thought I had heard at one point, did Fairford buy any of the lake, or is that just a bad rumor?
That would be news to me. I don't know. I don't think so.
Jim, had you heard that before?
Yeah, I definitely have heard discussions about that. I've never confirmed that though.
Okay. Yeah, again, I've just heard that rumors, for a while now. Any questions from the public on this open space?
Yeah, I think Dennis Frayne, actually, town administrator, is here. I think he had a comment. Dennis, you there?
I am, Jim.
We can hear you. Did you have any comments regarding the open space?
I think he's muted.
Oh, did you get muted? Oh, you did get muted. There you go.
I think I'm unmuted now, am I?
Yep, you're good.
I'm good. Yeah, just to follow up on what Jim was referring to with regard to that lot 10 on the lake that is used for drainage and it's controlled by the applicant. It'd be a great acquisition for open space. As you may know, there was a canoe launch on Silver Lake Road that went away with a drainage swale for the first project. So a lot of neighbors were disappointed with the fact that no longer could they launch their canoes or their boats from Silver Lake Road. You'd actually have to go over to the lake, which sometimes is closed. People like to go fishing and launch their boat there. So if there was any way we could acquire that small parcel, it does have a drainage swale on it, but I think there's certainly enough area to put a canoe launch there or a boat launch. I think it would go a long way towards making some people happy along Silver Lake Road in the neighborhood. We just wouldn't be able to allow parking. You'd drop your canoe off and have someone take your vehicle away. But it certainly is a loss, or was a loss, when the first project came in and the boat launch area went away. Thank you.
Dennis, I'm in total agreement. I think that'd be a great get for the town.
Mm-hmm. It would certainly be some very usable open space, and it's only probably 5,000 square feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the public?
If anybody does have comments, you're welcome to unmute or raise your hand.
My name is Carrie Clamola. I just had a quick question. I'm sorry I didn't bring it up regarding the buffer. That 100-foot buffer, will all the trees be taken down? We're concerned because right now I'm on 950. You know where my property is, probably because I was in the last meeting. So all the trees along our property, will they all be taken down, and then those few trees that you've pointed out, are those the trees that will be planted?
My understanding was none of the trees between those two black lines are being taken down. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me confirm that again. It is just, so any existing trees within this 100-foot buffer will remain as they are. What we're proposing in this area, because some of it is sparse and has been previously disturbed, is revegetate areas that currently don't have trees.
Okay, yeah, because there is a lot of trees like on the back. Yep, right where you are, right there. There are trees there, so we were concerned because if you took all those trees down, then we'd be like waving to the neighbors.
Our intention is not to take any more trees down.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's our goal. And actually, I think what Sean can do is to facilitate is they can mark that off prior to construction.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
So I think that should address your concerns.
Yep.
Sean, is that reasonable?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
So I would think they would only have to mark off the back portion and, to some degree, the portion furthest away from the 100-foot. But I think along those property lines where you and your neighbors are, that will be marked off. And I feel pretty confident that they will not disturb those trees. Now, there could be some exceptions. There could be some trees that are dying.
Right. Yep.
And, we can, as they go through with that, they may look at that. I can't guarantee that, but, there could be some instances
Right. And that's understandable.
under, proper management.
Mhm.
Any other questions on anything we discussed? I'd like to have the screen go back. I'd like to access, want to talk about the phasing plan? I think that's going to be a key point of discussion tonight. Jim, where do we stand right now with phasing? And first of all, I think, just tell me where we stand with phasing. And then we can pull down some definitions.
Sure. So Sean, I did notice you sent an updated phasing plan. The last time we had talked, the board had looked into some slightly more defined or refined phases. I think we might have been up to 6 at that point. And we also discussed almost like a 2-track phase where one's infrastructure, knowing that you need to put some binder down on the roads, you got to get water, sewer, etc., down at a larger swath. However, parallel track of maybe percentage of houses before you can move on to another phase. And I know Sean and I had some conversation about what that language would look like. And Sean, I don't know if you had a chance, it looks like you may have had a chance, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but some updated thoughts on that?
Yes, and if I can, I'll show a couple plans.
Sure.
Okay. Where are we? And, okay. So as Jim had mentioned, we kind of took a little bit different look at the phasing, and we've divided things 2 ways, as Jim was referencing. 1, infrastructure, and 2, housing construction. So I've separated this into 2 infrastructure phases. So I'll look at phase 1 infrastructure right now, and that's really just this right portion of the site. And again, this is the area that's required to go first because this is where our sewer and water connections are. So bring it into the site, stub it off, and then continue in the phase 2 infrastructure. In this phase 1 infrastructure area, I have 4 separate housing phases, and each housing phase is about 15 units. And one thing that I had to do with this plan, this area previously was a later phase. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 towards the end. But to incorporate this area, the stormwater flows this way to a pipe that then goes to this basin. So that's why this area has been added to the phase 1 infrastructure. And I've added some a note here indicating 1 on the overall infrastructure phase, that 75% of the phase 1 infrastructure houses must be at least have the building permits in under construction. But probably more importantly, which I think would dictate this, is for each of the building phases, and again, these 4 phases of about 15 buildings, 75% of those would have to be deemed substantially complete by the building inspector prior to beginning the next building phase. And so that's the phase 1, and then phase 2 is now a separate sheet to clearly define the 2. Would be then 3 phases of again, approximately 15 houses. I think one of these might have 16 with the same type of restrictions. And I think, and then at this point, while this is under construction, this would all be done. This access would be fully functional, and cars could use this. And in this phase, I kind of flip things around a little bit. We would start here and then go to here and then here, with the idea of, again, people not having to drive through construction. You could exit out this way while this final area is being developed. But the roadway would be constructed at least to Binder, you know, probably before any occupancy permits could be granted. So that would be the primary function of this infrastructure phase. All the infrastructure is done, and then the house building starts.
Anything else you want to add?
I think just the same things we've talked about before are still incorporated into this plan. The access off of Center Street for construction versus Cross Street would still be maintained. Would still have a haul road here to bring the stockpile into this first infrastructure phase to be used as fill. All of the stormwater basins would be constructed and complete as part of the phase one infrastructure. Yeah, I think, and we also have the erosion controls during construction along the haul road, as well as we have some detailed notes. These are basically from a SWIP that would be required for this site regardless. So just reiterating some of that stuff right on the plan, the temporary seating, stabilization, maintenance requirements. We have the temporary sedimentation basins, which again would have the maintenance requirements associated with this. So yeah, I think that this phasing would go a long way, I think, to meet some of the concerns we've heard from the board.
And with that, I'd like to go to the board. I'd like to switch up a little bit. Dennis, you added a lot of strong points at our last meeting in regards to phasing. Can you talk about what your concerns are, Dennis?
Yeah, I didn't quite hear his opening remarks there on the phasing. They're gonna be permitted lots before he does.
Yeah, so I think Sean's breaking it up now, and I think before the next meeting, we can have an opportunity to really read those details, because, you know, we haven't actually received this yet. But yeah, a certain percentage of houses would need to be completed or substantially completed before going to the next phase. And then overall, all those 4 phases right there, essentially the intent is a certain amount of houses need to be complete before he can go to the left side, the phase 2 of the infrastructure, essentially.
So he was not filling anything on spec.
Right, yeah, well, no, yeah.
Brian?
A couple questions. When the construction for the infrastructure goes in, does that require clear cutting the entire site for the homes and the infrastructure of the road, or is it just what needs to be done with the infrastructure?
Yes, with this, it would probably be the whole area. I think that we probably could structure it in a manner, maybe that the house lots not be cleared until that phase begins. I think that would make sense. You know, so when the phase 2 houses are getting ready to go, or, you know, when phase 1 reaches a certain point, then you can go and clear these house lots. Something like that, I think, could be reasonable.
Okay, yeah, I mean, just if we can, if that's possible. And then, what was my second thought? Jim, with regard to some other projects in town where we've had some interpretation differences with the developer in terms of substantially complete and essential infrastructure and all of that stuff. Is there a way to quantify that and to get some sort of approval at each level?
Oh, yeah, certainly. We can define those in our conditions. And we can, once you guys are to that point, we can certainly start putting something down on paper for you guys to look at and see what formula works. Substantial completion could mean, a certain number of occupancy permits have been requested, or maybe it's, everything short of an occupancy has been completed, something to that effect. And we could put it right in the conditions there. So there's no ambiguity as to what essential infrastructure or anything like that is.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I have no other questions.
Liz, any comments?
No, my only comment was sort of along the same lines as Brian in terms of the 75% and making sure we're all in agreement about what it means to be complete before moving on to the next phase.
Phil?
No additional comments.
I'd like to just pick up on what some other people have said. I don't feel comfortable with building permits. As we define what phasing will be, I think it should be a percentage of occupancy permits. I know people have mentioned other developments in town. Obviously, it can't be turnkey, but I'd like to see it phased in such a manner where when you move from, and this is only for the houses, is when you move from one phase, and we'll define this, that it looks like it's an almost moving condition. So people can move in before you move on to another phase. So I'd rather see a percentage based on occupancy as opposed to building permits. And I know we've spent a lot of time tonight talking about the triangle at the top of this development in open space and the issues that were arose based on how this piece of property was treated. I want to avoid that at all costs moving forward, because this is going to be where people are going to live in their community. And I want it as seamless as possible. I'm sorry, Russ, I didn't call on you, excuse me.
Oh, that's fine, Bill. I have no further questions. Thanks.
I apologize. I didn't see it on the screen until just now. Paris.
Bill, can I ask one question?
In to our discussion.
I just have one question, if you don't mind. The other consideration, and it might be in the notes to the plan that you just showed, is as we move from phase to phase, that there's adequate screening in the neighborhood and in between the phases, so that to the best of their ability, that we're not creating eyesores along the way.
The one positive of this one is you got a 100-foot buffer around the whole property, so that is somewhat of a positive. But yeah, certainly, I know we've talked to Sean about in a draft SWIP that shows things like dust fencing and other screening things. I know you provided some of that stuff already. We can certainly look at that to see if there's any ability to beef that up to make sure there's screening.
I'd like to go back, and I apologize. Russ, I apologize. I didn't see you on screen until a second ago, until the screen was. Do you have any questions or comments, anything we've just discussed before?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Bill.
Nothing at all. You sure? I am, again, my
I did speak up once when I had a question, so I'm good.
Before we move on, there are a few things I think we need to address. Jim, there was a neighbor who had an above ground pool that was impacted by what I call Fafford Mountain. Where does that stand right now?
The neighbors here, if you would like to.
Yep, my name's Carrie. I'm actually on the line. I finally did receive a call from Fafford's attorney this afternoon, actually. So they're going to have somebody from a pool company to come in and inspect the damage, and we'll move from there. So
Okay, I just like to make a point. We had a meeting over a month ago, and this was a priority. And you were, the first time you heard from anyone from Fairford
yeah,
this afternoon?
we haven't heard from anybody. And then in the meantime, actually, we already had to drain the pool a little bit because the motor died, the filter died. So we lost the last part of the summer since the
Okay.
last meeting.
So since our last meeting, the first time you heard from anyone was from an attorney today?
From an attorney today, yes.
Okay, that was not the impression this board was provided at our last meeting. Jim, is that correct?
Yeah, certainly, you know, I know Sean is kind of in the middle of this, but he certainly, I'm sure he's tossed it over to Bafford's team to, and I know they're cognizant of it. I know Attorney Roloffs has provided us with an action plan as of the Friday after our meeting. I know it was hydroseeded, and there is grass now growing somewhat on there, so that's positive. They're definitely watering it at this point now.
And what I like to do, I know, and I'm well aware this is a public meeting. I'd like to entertain a motion from the board to express our displeasure in the response we received from Fafford to a neighbor a month ago. As chairman, I cannot make a motion. Would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor of documenting our displeasure with the response to a neighbor? Any discussion, first of all?
Yeah, if we can have some discussion. I don't disagree with the sentiment at all. I don't know if it requires any formal motion on our part of the, you know, I am not surprised that there's been no response. It's actually in keeping with our experience with this particular applicant with other developments in town. It's unfortunate, but I'm reluctant to make any official proclamation concerning this. It's something that we need to be mindful of, who we're dealing with, the quality of work, or the lack of quality of work that this particular applicant has shown, and other developments in town is certainly something that we need to be mindful of and as we go through this process. But I really don't want to make any official proclamation, although I don't disagree at all with the sentiment contained in your motion. That would be my hesitation.
I'd like to give you my viewpoint. I'm in agreement with everything you said, except the fact that I'm more than disappointed. This woman has been impacted for a long time now. I suspect the reason they responded today was that we had a meeting tonight. I just think it adds a little weight to the concern that the board has in the way this neighbor responded. And again, this is open discussion. We have a motion on the floor. Anyone else's comments before I ask for the vote?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question to the neighbor with the pool? And her impression of the amount of dust and dirt coming in her direction still? Has it improved?
Oh, it definitely has improved. Definitely has improved since the grass started growing. I've been taking some pictures. It was just, I wish I took pictures of the clouds of smoke of dust that came in. And then when we drained some of the pool, I drained it on our patio, and the dirt coming up on our patio, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. The damage that was done to, yeah. Oh, hold on, my husband's talking. Yeah, the motor in our pool, it blew up, the dust and dirt blew out with the bearings and the seal from all the vacuuming that we've done. I mean, we couldn't open our windows.
May I ask,
It really impacted us a lot, but yes, it has improved because the grass is growing, and I believe it improved because of the last meeting and when Fafford was told that they had to hydroseed it and actually take care of it. Yes, I mean, definitely there's nothing that's been, but they haven't been over there either. There's no more dumping of dirt.
okay, so it's improving, is it?
Yep.
Rephrase that. Is it an acceptable situation right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that clarifies.
Yep.
Liz?
I mean, I have no comments. I agree with the sentiment that, you're with the motion, but I have no.
Dennis?
I'm good, Bill.
We have a motion on the floor. Russ, do you want me to call for the vote?
Yes.
All in favor of making a motion to express our displeasure with the way this applicant has treated a neighbor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. How many people is that, Jim?
I got at least, what, 4? Right. Oh, you, 5-0.
Okay. So that will be added to the minutes. At some point, we need to talk about construction management. Jim, when will that be?
Yeah, so I think Sean's got a good start with what was provided this evening. We haven't received those yet, so Sean can send those along to us, and I can start looking at the details and send them along to you guys. There's a little bit of homework for Sean, I know he's doing. And yeah, you're right, construction management, maybe beefing up that draft SWIP a little bit. And start looking at and the phasing conditions. Now that Sean's got a pretty good start on that, I think we can, and the board's given some direction, I think we can start ratcheting that up as well.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question to
Absolutely.
Jim? The amount of dirt that went in there, was there a special permit that was required to move the dirt?
No, so the issue going on there is it's kind of convoluted, but so it's from a 40B.
Okay.
So a 40B doesn't require a special permit for earth removal.
It would be the zoning board that would usually.
Right, the zoning board would deal with earth removal permits. And so, however, while it didn't require an earth removal permit, my and the building inspector's interpretation of once it landed at Bellingham Shores and the disruption it created for over 10,000 square feet, I had stated that I believed it required at minimum a stormwater permit. And so, or a site plan review, one of the two. And so Mr. Fafford called me and asked what would be required of that. And they provided a plan sheet which included stormwater controls, and that was the extent of it. And then we requested for them to stop at that point, in which that's what they did there. They stopped and hydroseeded. Well, the request was to hydroseed, and that's why the first initial spray occurred. But however, it just wasn't maintained, in my opinion. And that's why we see our neighbor with dust, because it never got formally stabilized in that area. And that's when it came to a head at the last meeting, which then Attorney Roloff provided that action plan to formally stabilize it. There. That's kind of.
Okay, so it doesn't have to go in front of the zoning board to move that type of dirt.
Yeah, I mean, from a normal development, if it was leaving this site and going elsewhere, it's a special permit as opposed to a 40B, so it's treated differently. Unfortunately, that's just how we look, how it was interpreted, as well as we're looking at kind of the big picture. The material was already there, and for us to require him to haul it back would just create even more havoc to, Bellingham roads, or haul it out of town, which would create even more havoc. So, it was there. My understanding, the intent was it to be filled for whatever, if this ever gets permitted here. So, limiting the amount of disturbance on the roads and in the area was kind of our approach to it, to not require them to haul it back. And then,
But this is an issue where if it was addressed ahead of time, there might have been a zoning board special permit that was needed. Possibly.
Yeah, well, so if let's just say they were taking it from this site, it would certainly need a zoning board special permit for earth removal. It's the reason for our belief that it didn't require a special permit at the time was it was part of Lakeview Estates, which is a comprehensive, it's a different project. It's a 40B, and so that was the interpretation there. It's more of the disturbance that it created at the landing zone that we found it at.
So at this point, there's an agreement, no more dirt would be moved.
That's right.
Onto the site at this point.
No more material comes to the site, and it's to be stabilized, which they're working towards.
Jim, I have two comments. I'm gonna go back to something I said at the last meeting. I thought part of the reason this was done was as a cost savings to the applicant. And it bothered me that it started appearing overnight. And as I said, and we made a motion, it bothered me about the interaction that the applicant had with a neighbor. And as Brian said, it sort of goes to the tone and tenor of how he's operated in the past in Bellingham and in other towns. And I'm just disappointed. That's a main thoroughfare through the heart of Bellingham. And we have to, look at that when we drive by. And again, I think one of the considerations, obviously, was cost savings. In that regard, Jim, where do we stand now with what remains to be done on what I affectionately call, or unaffectionately call, Thafford Mountain?
So the owner still needs to continue to monitor to make sure that it progresses in its stabilization. So that's an ongoing matter that will likely keep on going until such time as that material's moved into place.
Mr. Chairman, on the August 14th memo, the action plan, there was a hydro seeding that was deadline that was going to be the 14th. And then I'm seeing a second hydro seeding application, the deadline September 11th. Is the applicant planning on doing that by the 11th?
Which will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I would suspect by the way they've dealt with the neighbor, it'll probably be done tomorrow by 5 o'clock.
I guess I'd ask the applicant, what's the plan on the action plan on the second hydro seed application? First one looks like it was the 14th. I'll say I do see some more, driving past it tonight, I saw more green. But it looked like your action plan had a second hydro seed application by Friday, the September 11th. Is that still part of the plan?
I would assume so. I don't know. I haven't been directly involved with kind of their construction activities that are associated with that, but I'm certainly going to mention that to them first thing in the morning and insist that they do that.
Jim, will you follow up as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have someone go out there later on Friday.
Anything else from the public before we move on to the next item? So Jim, Frank and Sean, we have some action item lists that we need to get done. Can we work on these as soon as possible?
Yes.
Bill, if I could add just one more thing to that list of things to think about. I think we've discussed this sort of casually or tangentially in previous meetings, but I still would like to see some sort of character or some sort of personality, something to this project. The properties are very close together. They're small lots. I appreciate the trees. There's a number of trees that have been added in between the homes and along the street, and I do appreciate that. But if there is something to make this development not just a row of new houses, I'm really interested in those ideas, that this is a densely populated neighborhood that's going in, and it really does need to have some character to it. So I'd be interested in those ideas in the upcoming meetings as well.
Actually, I think we echoed that, it's lightly throughout the discussion, where I think I wanted some different flavor, and that's what the type of houses. So I echo what Brian says. This needs to look like a village. Something that, goes with the character of where we live and where we all reside. Is that acceptable, Sean?
Well, I will mention that. I will bring that to them. I mean, I guess my thought with regard to that is, I mean, this is a subdivision. It's a cluster subdivision. It's specifically designed and intended to maximize a density in a small amount of area. These houses, I think for the most part, are going to be kind of built to suit. So I'm not sure how to address that right now, to be honest with you.
Well, I'll give you an idea. That we've had another developer in a different area of town suggest pocket parks, things like that. Little amenities where people can go that live in that neighborhood. That it gives it a little bit of character. Is the only thing I could say.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. Rather than flavor, the word I use.
There are other developments in town that are, you drive through it, it's just house, small little tree, house, small little tree, house, small little tree. You think to yourself, why do people buy these houses? But they do. And I really don't want to see that on this scale, in this density here. So there's things that can be done. I'm not saying get rid of 6 lots and put a park, but something to make this, I don't know what the word is, but you get the idea. Las Vegas. Yeah.
Can I just pick up on something Brian said? And I know you called it a subdivision. Once you build and leave, it's not referred to as a subdivision. It's going to be referred to as a neighborhood in Bellingham. And, we want to look more than a subdivision. We want to make it attractive to people where they feel very comfortable. And one of the last things I want to bring up, although it's not specifically outlined in the agenda, is I want to go back and talk about our interpretation and your interpretation, going back to the last meeting, of inclusionary housing. My viewpoint, and I believe the viewpoint shared by the board, was that when you drive down the street from the outside, you should not be able to tell from lot size or house size what inclusionary housing, what is inclusionary and non-inclusionary. I had mentioned that before. And that's going to add to the character and the flavor of this neighborhood. I want to get away from, although technically it's called a subdivision, you know, it's a neighborhood where people live. You know, Summers and the board could buy there. Any of the neighbors could buy there. It needs to be something that you just don't walk away from and say you built a subdivision and move on. You know, I want this to have neighborhood appeal. And maybe add as much curb appeal as we can within the confines of what we're dealing with. Does that address some of your concerns?
Yeah, so I hear what you all are saying. So we'll take this back. We'll give it some thought and try to have something to address that more specifically next time we meet.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jim, in regards to this topic?
No, not at this time.
I'd like to move on to 164 McKenna Street site plan review.
But before we do that, maybe we have a request for a continuation to the certain.
You recommend the start date, Jim?
So I believe, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were continued with conservation to October 7th?
14th, I believe.
Oh, 14th. Oh, are they off on ours? There's not a ton of homework. I would recommend October 8th seems to be reasonable in that regard. I mean, if the board agrees, Sean has a few things, him and I can work through some of this language stuff. And yeah, it seems reasonable. It could be before the conservation the following week.
Okay, wouldn't it be October 22nd?
That is also a meeting date, so you're welcome. Either one. I don't know if the applicant has or has any recommendation.
Our request would be to the 8th for the reasons that Jim outlined. I think that we can, between now and then, we can get some of these things that we've been talking about tonight ironed out and further along and still have a productive discussion on the 8th.
Jim, we already have Red Mill. Okay, so we'll basically have two major topics that night, which is fine.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying though, Bill. It's getting started. It's starting to get a little crowded.
Okay, can I have a motion to entertain the continuation to October 8th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of continuation to October 8th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a good night. We'll see you on the 8th.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you for working with us.
You bet.
Thank you.
Jim will update us on 164 Mechanic Street.
Yeah, so 164 Mechanic Street is a small lot in between Antron Engineering and what is to be a new street, that Lincoln property that this board is well familiar with. And actually, you guys are probably very familiar with this lot as Miss Virginia's home during the Lincoln properties discussion. In your package, you have a one sheet plan before you that discusses stormwater. Also before us tonight is Matt Clark, the property owner, who certainly can speak to this. The reason he's before us this evening is there was a single family home on site that was taken down, and some significant grades have changed, but however, there, to my understanding, not a formal proposal yet for development of this site. So I've asked Mr. Clark to come in with essentially a site plan to stabilize and shore up the site until such time as the development plan is provided to us. So really, this is kind of an intermediate step, and Mr. Clark or others may be before us, or in the near future, probably for the potential development of the site. So really the intent here is just to take a look at the site and see if there's any opportunities to safely secure this and minimize any impacts to abutters or the right of way, which obviously fronts on Mechanic Street, a well-traversed road. So those are the main aspects of it for this evening, and we'll certainly get into much more detail at a later date when a formal development proposal is before us.
Matt, the floor's all yours.
Great. Good evening. I'm Matthew Clark, manager of TMC Holdings and Development, the owner of the property. We acquired the property roughly middle of February of this year with intent to prepare it for a future development. We demolished the house in May after some fire training was conducted there. And an opportunity presented itself for the adjacent construction project that Lincoln Properties is conducting to receive some fill on the site. We had some low areas on the site. So we took advantage of that and didn't realize quite how extensive that filling was going to be. As you can see, it is now fully graded at street level, and it kind of serves as the temporary construction yard for all that work that's taking place on 140 in connection with the Lincoln Properties project. So Jim had asked that we prepare an erosion control plan as well as an O&M plan to handle potential runoff issues. Prior to any work starting, we installed the necessary erosion control measures along the down gradient part of the property. We have maintained those, been no issues with runoff. So as soon as the construction work is done on the adjacent lot, and we're done using that lot for temporary storage, we'll secure the site in accordance with the plan and maintain the erosion control until such time as we have a development proposal to present to the board. And would you like to go through the plan?
Go ahead, Bill.
Jim, what do we need to do for action?
So I think if we could just quickly go through the plan itself, and if there's any recommendations. So the deliverable here is a memo to the building inspector, so that if there is any concerns, dust issues, erosion, stormwater issues, that we can then turn to Mr. Clark and say, please shore up this location in accordance with the plan. So if there's any opportunities to improve upon this plan, and I have just a couple small ones if I can kick it off. So Mr. Clark, I mentioned that it's currently a site for active construction. That's the road widening of 140. And that's actually a great opportunity, because a lot of times with DOT and these widening projects, they don't have locations to store, so this just so happens to work out. But yeah, when that is complete, I would ask that it be fenced off on at least the frontage of that. I don't think it's necessary to go all the way around, just given that that there's elevation differences and basic structures and all that for the Lincoln properties. But simply, I'm looking at it in terms of people pulling on and off Mechanic Street. I would prefer that they are limited to not being able to access the site at this time. Maybe it's just one car length, so that yourself, or if you're showing a prospective buyer or whoever, can pull in. But if the front fence could be shored up once the construction is completed for the widening, and then just ongoing maintenance of that down slope, because there is we did notice some, and we shared it with you, some leakage essentially that's getting around the silt fence. So if there's any opportunities there. My other question would be that if there's any opportunity to maybe not fully loam and seed, but if there's any opportunity to stabilize this fall, given the planting season, it doesn't have to be in-depth hydro seeding or anything like that, but just right now it's kind of a dusty area, and now's an opportune time to stabilize it. So when when the guys leave the site, if we could, stabilize it, make it a nice little grassy area for the time being. That would, I think, be beneficial. That's really all I had for this one.
Do we need an action, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, if no one else has any comments, yeah, just an action to recommend to the building inspector those conditions. I certainly can formalize that.
I just have a question. You talking about the circle area here?
The whole triangle
The
itself.
whole time?
Yeah, the whole triangle right now is open. The circle is where they're just storing material.
Okay. No, but where was the property? That was the whole property.
Yeah, the whole property. The house was more or less in the dead center, right?
It's not, there's a,
Oh yeah, you can kind of see it in the painted underneath there. The two triangles or rectangles are the house, or the square is the house. Then she had a garage and something else back there, shed or something.
Okay. I get it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, when's the plans for the road widening to be completed? Is that by winter or is that into next year? Or?
I think the intent is by the end of November.
So this is real short term.
Yeah, this is short term.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
What kind of motion do we need?
Just to recommend the conditions stated and
Move forward to the building department.
yeah, to issue a memo to site plan approval to the building inspector.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And, any discussion? I'll call for the motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Jim, the urban air release of funds,
Yep, so that is actually Mr. Clark as well. So we figured we'd just knock it all out at once. So in your, I believe. you
did
have-
someone ask the question?
Yep.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so I believe you have the handout that is the agreement in place, and I can't seem to find it right now. Here's somewhere. Oh, here it is. Here's one. That's it. There we go. Maybe a hand them all. All right, so the security agreement that you have for this, so just to jog everybody's memory here. So this was an agreement in place due to urban air, trampoline and adventure park. This site has one access point, and the discussion was a secondary egress. There wasn't really an obvious solution to that secondary egress. Not to the applicant certainly did investigate different opportunities. In those discussions, it came forth that a real opportunity here would be to connect that plaza where PJ's and Primo and Marshall's is with the rapid refill. And the reason for that is there's a lot of traffic that leaves the gas station, goes to the plaza, leaves the plaza, goes to the gas station. A lot of folks that park in the plaza and walk over to the gas station in the mornings and perhaps in the evenings. And so that connection seemed to be an obvious connection. Unfortunately, the property owner that owns the space in which rapid refill resides is not in favor of that connection. The plaza owner, to my understanding, is in favor of that connection. But nevertheless, while we were working through those ins and outs, the security agreement was formalized, and $7,500 was put aside by Mr. Clark in case we were able to achieve that connection. So that was dated July of 2017. To this day, there still isn't any opportunity to make that connection. Unfortunately, the property owner has chosen not to work with us on that. So that Mr. Clark is here today to request if there would be an opportunity to release that. So,
Jim, what's your recommendation?
you know, honestly, I would hate to lose the opportunity if one day it came forward to make that connection. To be honest with you, so I would love to hold on to it, but I'm certainly willing to have that discussion with Mr. Clark about his thoughts on it. I know the property owner does not want to make that connection, and to be fair in the conversation, it has been over 3 years. So I certainly leave it up to the board.
So,
Jim, is it fair to ask that you can, outside this meeting, sit down with Matt and discuss your concerns with him, and then let the board know, and we can make a motion at the first meeting in October? Matt, is it,
I don't want to speak for Matt, and Matt maybe, but I don't think he's opposed to making that connection, or it's more of the property owner. It's somewhat out of his hands. I don't.
Yeah, so I don't think the property owner's ever gonna change his mind anytime soon. I think we all know that. So it's kind of a moot point.
okay,
And, if you look at the traffic in that parking lot, I can't imagine the tenant is gonna want to actually lose any parking spaces there as well, even though they gain some by using the plaza, by the hall. So I just don't see this changing anytime soon. I do recall the boards that they wanted to keep the money for 3 to 5 years, something like that. It's been 3 years, nothing's changing, nothing's gonna change. So it just seems pointless.
Brian, what's your thought? What are your thoughts?
Jim, am I reading this the wrong way, but is paragraph 2A required the release of funds within 12 months? The construction was supposed to happen in 12 months?
That was the intent of the applicant, was to do it in 12 months, and if not, then we would use those funds to potentially do it if
yeah, that was my question. You said in case.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get clarification on what in case.
Oh, at the time, yeah, it was more of, Mr. Clark was doing all the site work right around the corner at Urban Air. Obviously, you can do it for significantly cheaper than the town can do it. So the thought was, if we were to get buy-in, and we did have buy-in from Rapid Refill at the time, but they don't have a say ultimately. And so, it didn't work out at that time. So it was more of a, much like other securities, if the applicant or the developer doesn't do something and we have that security in hand, we could technically go out and finish the job. But obviously it costs a lot more, and it's a lot more administrative work for a town to do construction activities.
So, I mean, Mr. Clark's been before us a number of times. He's always been very cooperative and does.
What I'd like to do is, Ron, we'd like to make a motion.
Yeah, I don't want to hold his money. It would be great to keep it just in case, but if the other property owner would agree to that, because that is a much needed passageway, I think, in that area. But I don't want to hold his money if there's no shot of ever happening.
So what I'd like to do is have a motion, and then we can discuss it amongst all of us. So would someone like to make a motion to return the money back to the applicant?
So
Do I have a second?
second.
Liz, any concerns?
No, I have no concerns with returning the money.
Russ?
No, I have no concerns with that.
Dennis?
No.
Brian, I assume you have no concerns?
No.
Phil?
Discussion point, out of fairness, I think we should return the money.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
out of fairness, I think we should return the money. I mean, there's been.
I'm in agreement, you know, and I'm gonna, agree with Matt. Matt, you feel this will never happen in the
Yeah, we-
foreseeable future?
Exhausted our attempts to try to, negotiate to make it happen, but it's pretty clear.
So we have motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion to return the money to the applicant, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Jim, the easement with Campanelli, can you bring us up to speed on that?
I'll shoot a memo, I'll copy you. It probably won't be till Monday or Tuesday. Yes, so the next item is the granted easement for Campanelli. So in your package, you have the documentation for grant of easement with a plan associated with it. What the discussion here tonight is vote to recommend acceptance of this. What's going on here is most of the board will remember during the time of permitting for 160 High Street, so ultimately the Amazon building, there was a left turn lane that needed to be added into the site to get into the site, which created a widening of Maple Street. And so as of right now, the right of way, where our roads are driving onto, is not, it's not in town ownership essentially, because it's on their property. So this grants the easement so that we have the rights essentially to pass and repass and all that fun stuff that goes along with it.
Do we have anyone here from representing Campanelli, Jim?
We do not. No, this is more of an administrative item just to shore up. And this was, I will say,
This has gone through our attorney?
yeah, it's gone through our attorney and approved by the select and signed off on by the select.
I'm certainly not an attorney. Brian, have you had a chance to review this?
Yeah, I would defer to town council's expertise.
Russ, are you in agreement?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes. So
Dennis?
I would ask a question about a process from here. Looks like we'd be voting to recommend an acceptance. Then what happens after that?
It has to go to town meeting to formally get approved.
Do we have a place held for this for October?
Pardon?
Do we have a
Oh,
place held for the
place-
warrant?
Sorry, what was the question?
Do we have a place held on the warrant?
No, not at this time. Oh, you mean, oh, sorry, yes, there is a place on the warrant for this.
Okay. Dennis, any comments?
No, I'm in agreement.
Liz?
No, I am good.
So I'll move to, does it recommend, Jim? Recommend
Accepted.
acceptance of this.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Have we all had a chance to look at the meeting minutes from our last meeting? If so, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So
Do I have a second?
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and it's been seconded to approve our minutes from our last meeting. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Jim, we have a busy day, meeting on the 8th. Do you see a need for a second meeting in October right now?
Potentially. I'll keep the board updated. There might be a new proposal submitted for the gentleman at JD Raymond on Maple Street. So I'll keep you guys posted on that one. I do have one other item though, just your stipends, if you would like to get paid. If I could have a motion to sign the planning board stipends.
Ooh.
Second.
Motion on the floor to sign our payments. All in favor, please stand up by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Jim, I can't sign it. I'm not there.
That's all right, we'll still pay it.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, I know you're down the Cape, are you on your yacht? Because the voice has been getting weaker the whole evening.
I'm sorry?
Are you on your yacht?
No, why?
Because your voice has been getting weaker the whole evening. I didn't know if you were drifting out to sea.
No,
Okay.
I don't have a
Let
yacht.
me clarify that.
Let me clarify that, rumor. There's no yacht in the house.
I think the reason why he doesn't have video on,
That's what I figured.
he's watching the football game.
Nope. Can I have a motion to adjourn? My microphone's not picking a lot up. A motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Have a good night, Bill.
Thank you.